We can go live whenever you want.
Fantastic. Well, assembled company, whether
Hi.
you're in the room or whether you're watching on various devices, Facebook, YouTube, or just on the site without joining us. We'd love you to join us. Just press the gold button saying join meeting. You can come in the room with us. But wherever you are, welcome to the World Storytelling Cafe. And I'm very pleased now. In fact, I'm delighted to welcome for the first time in the cafe, sitting in Switzerland, the amazing, the fantastic Shelly Verma. Can you put your hands together, please?
So this is where I begin, right? All right. I have a little poem for the beginning of my story. India is the land of 7 rivers. The rivers that are worshipped like mothers and sisters and goddesses. Rivers meandering through the vast landscape of the country. Rivers that have witnessed history. Rivers that have seen the rise and the fall of the cities. Rivers that have carried the Vedic chants and the verses of Ramayana, Mahabharata, Quran, and Bible. Rivers that have washed off the blood of various conquests and battles. Rivers that have lived to see the rise of new India, and the rivers that are dead. Now, in this land, India, we call Hindustan, there is a place where 3 of these rivers, Ganga, Yamuna, and the mystical Saraswati, they meet. And people, they travel from all around the country to bathe in this Sangam, in this auspicious point. Now, in this setting, a long, long time ago, when the planet of Jupiter entered the house of Aries and the sun entered the house of Capricorn, a planetary alignment which happened once in 12 years, the most beautiful maiden in the kingdom of Vidarbha was born. She was named Damayanti, Princess Damayanti. And people said that she was as lovely as a celestial nymph. At the same time, not far from there, in the kingdom of Nishat, the most handsome prince in the world was born. And he was named Nal. Now, when he was born, the astrologers, they proclaimed that he would be the foremost of the kings. He would bring fame and fortune to the kingdom, and he would be Vikramaditya. Vikramaditya was a title which was given to the kings who possessed the valor of sun. So the time passed, and Nal became the young ruler of Nishad. Oh, he was a tiger among men. Although he was young, he was wise and just, and he surrounded himself, with wise, intelligent, kind people. And he was a keen huntsman, an excellent archer. He loved poetry. He loved to compose his own poems. And he was a fantastic cook. I mean, his potato curry with puffed puris, the Indian bread, was the most talked about in the entire kingdom. And of all his hobbies and pastimes, he actually spent most number of hours in riding his chariots. His handling of horses was unsurpassed in the land. Really, he had everything, but he was missing one thing. He was missing a queen who would be his equal, a queen who had to be as lovely as he was handsome. But more importantly, she had to be clever, intelligent, wise, have a keen interest in music, poetry, and there was only one person, only one woman who fit the bill, and that was Damayanti. You see, fame and beauty of Damayanti had spread to distant places. Wandering bards, they traveled from court to court to court, and they sang songs in her praise. And that is how Nal he came to, know about Damayanti, because one of the bards had come to his court and he has said, "Oh, great king, Nal, king of kings, tiger among men, let me tell you about the ravishing Damayanti. She's as radiant and gorgeous as Usha, the goddess of dawn, riding her golden chariot in the sky. And she's fashioned with all things lovely by the loving hands of Manmat, the god of love himself. O king, she's wise, she's intelligent, she's clever, and she has a keen interest, and she's very curious about things. And king, now, if you marry her, then I can assure you, you would be even happier than the king who married the carpenter's daughter." And Nal was, of course, he wanted to know more about Damayanti, but he was like, "Who is this king? And who is this carpenter's daughter you're talking about?" And the bard said, "Listen. There was once a carpenter who had 3 daughters, and they lived in a tiny little house. They did not have much, but they did the best they could. Now, in front of their tiny little house, they had a little courtyard. And in the middle of the courtyard, they had a Tulsi Vrindavan. Now, Tulsi Vrindavan is a special kind of masonry structure which is built to hold Tulsi, which is the holy basil plant. And it's a plant that is revered in all the Hindu households. So it was quite a respected, revered structure. And the girls, the 3 of them, they took turns each day, looking after the plant. They watered the plant in the morning and in the evening. They lit a clay lamp in front of the plant, in front of the Tulsi, after offering their morning and evening prayers. And that's how they lived. Not far from their house was the king's palace, the Raja's palace. Now, this Raja, he thought himself to be very clever. You see, he was very fond of riddles. And he would challenge anyone and everyone he'd meet with riddles. And he was quite proud of the fact that no one could ever keep up with him. No one could solve his riddles. So one day, the Raja, he meandered off his usual path and he landed in front of the carpenter's home. And there was the oldest daughter, as dazzling as the midday sun. She was out there and she was watering the Tulsi, the holy basil. So the Raja looked at her and he smiled and he said, "Young lady, grant me your best appraisal. How many leaves in your holy basil?" And the oldest daughter, she was shocked. She was shocked to see the Raja, and she was even more shocked that he was speaking to her. And, her mind went blank and she felt so embarrassed that she ran inside the house. The king just smiled, the Raja just smiled and went off. He came by the next day again. This is fun. And this time, the middle daughter, who was as radiant as the full moon in the night sky, she was out there and she was watering the Tulsi, lighting the lamp. And the Raja saw her. "Oh, she's lovely." And he smiled and he said, "Young lady, grant me your best appraisal. How many leaves in your holy basil?" And the middle daughter was shocked. She was shocked to see the Raja, and she was even more shocked that he was speaking to her. And her mind went blank, color rose to her cheeks, she blushed, and her tongue was glued to the roof of her mouth, and she ran inside the house. Raja went off. The 3rd day, he came by again. And this time, the youngest daughter, her eyes were as bright as the twinkling stars in the sky. And she was out there and she was watering the Tulsi. And the king looked at her and smiled. Young lady, grant me your best appraisal. How many leaves in your holy basil? And he was quite sure what was going to happen. But this youngest daughter, she did not blush. She did not feel embarrassed. She folded her hands, she bowed her head and said, "O Raja, give me your best reply. How many clouds are in the sky?" And the Raja was flabbergasted. This girl, this carpenter's daughter, she had answered his riddle with another riddle for which he had no answer. And he just left. And he gave this matter a great deal of thought. He had to have one up with this youngest daughter. So he sent his spies all around the kingdom to gather information. We are quite familiar with this, aren't we? So then the spies, they came back with this information about the girls. You see, the carpenter's daughters, they had a terrible sweet tooth. They had cravings for sweet greater than anyone else in the kingdom. And they loved, especially loved, imarti. Now, I don't know if you know what imarti is, but imarti is it's a flower-shaped sweet, which is made by deep frying lentil batter. And then that flour is soaked in a sticky sweet syrup. Yum. So these girls were immensely fond of imarti. And so that was the plan. So Raja, he summoned his Khansama, his chef, and he ordered him to make a basket full of imartis. So that's what the cook did. And Raja, he dressed himself as a mithai wala, as a sweet seller. And he landed in front of the carpenter's house. And he started screaming, "Imarti, imarti, 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 imarti." And the daughters, oh my God, they were excited. And they could smell, and the air was sticky and sweet with the smell of imarti. And they quickly opened the door and let him inside. And they asked him, "Okay, how much are the imartis for?" And the Raja said, well, he's going to sell imartis only for kisses. One kiss, one imarti. Two kisses, two imartis. Three kisses, three imartis. And you can do the rest of the math. The eldest daughter, the oldest one, she felt terribly insulted. How dare he? And she was so angry that she stomped off out of the house. The middle daughter was vastly affronted too. She had never felt so embarrassed in her life. And she was so embarrassed that tears started rolling down her cheeks. And she too, she left the house and she slammed the door shut. The youngest daughter, she was not fond of kissing strangers, but she really loved imarti. And she knew her sisters did too. So she looked at the imarti, she looked at the king, she looked at the imarti, she looked at the king, and she traded him 3 kisses for 3 imartis. And I can tell you the king was quite happy to receive the kisses from this lovely young daughter. And he left. The next day, he came by at the same time. He knew that the youngest girl would be out, watering the tulsi. And he stood there and he smiled and he said, "Young lady, grant me your best appraisal. How many leaves in your holy basil?" The youngest daughter, she smiled and she said, "Oh Raja, give me your best reply. How many clouds in the sky?" And she thought that was it. But the king, he gave his broadest grin and he said, "You with your answers, so smart and handy, tell me, how many kisses did you give for imarti?" And he stood there and he watched as color rose to her cheeks and she blushed and she was so embarrassed that she ran inside the house. And the king was quite self-satisfied and he left. Days passed, weeks passed, and call it ill luck, misfortune, or the wheel of destiny, the wheel of karma, that he fell, the king, the Raja, he fell ill. He stopped eating, he stopped drinking, he just lay on his bed moaning and groaning with an unexplainable pain. People around him thought that he was going to die. So they sent messengers all around. The Ayurvedic doctors came with their Ayurvedic jari booties and pills. The shamans came, the babas came with their brooms to cure the king. But nothing could cure him. He just lay there waiting for the death to arrive. Now the youngest daughter too had heard about this. And she thought to herself, oh, this is time for the sweet revenge. And you see, because women, they may forgive, but they never forget. And so she whispered her plan into her father's ears. Now this carpenter, he loved his youngest daughter too much to say no. So he just went along with the plan. So this father, the carpenter, he dressed himself in a red dhoti, a long skirt. And then he wore a thick, long mustache. Then this girl, she rummaged through her old trunk and she took out an old mace that she had bought from one of the Ram Leela bazaars. And then she also found a little crown for her father. And then she went inside and she got a rope and she practiced for hours till she came up with a perfect noose. And so there he was. The father, he was dressed in a red dhoti, wearing a long, thick mustache, crown on his head, carrying a noose. All he needed was a buffalo. So the girl, she borrowed, their neighbor's buffalo. And so father led the buffalo to the palace. He wasn't sure what he was doing, why he was doing it, but the girl had dressed him as Yamraj, the god of death. So when the palace guards, they saw him approaching, they were very terrified. I mean, who wants to see Yamraj? Yamraj was the one who was supposed to take them away, capture their souls in his noose. So they just let him pass to the palace. And he made his way to the Raja's bedroom. When the Raja, he saw Yamraj by his bedside, he fell down to his knees and he said, please, 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 please spare me. Let me live for a few more years. I'm not even married. I don't even have children. Why, I haven't even ventured beyond my neighboring kingdom. Please, please. And Yamraj, he had learned his script quite well. He did as his daughter had asked him to. And he said, listen, I've come to take you. No more days, no more weeks, no more months, no more years. Let's go. And he said, please, 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 please. And this Yamraj, this fake Yamraj, he pretended to give this matter a great deal of thought. Okay, let me think. All right, maybe. Okay, here's the deal. I will grant you 1 year for each kiss that you plant under my buffalo's tail. Go on, lift the buffalo's tail. Go on, don't hesitate. And the king did not hesitate. He lifted the buffalo's tail. And I don't have to tell you how it smelled and what was there, but he just planted kiss upon kiss upon kiss upon kiss. And when Yamraj had enough, he said, okay, king, stop. Raja, stop. I will not take you. May you have a long, healthy life. And the carpenter, dressed as a Yamraj, he let the buffalo out of the palace. Maybe it was good luck. Maybe the king was fortunate, or maybe it was just that his sense of self-satisfaction had vanished after kissing the buffalo, that he became okay. He recovered. And in no time, he was up and about as if nothing had happened. But he could never stop thinking about the carpenter's youngest daughter. He just wanted to go there, tease her with some riddles. If nothing, just look at her lovely face. And so one evening he stopped by. The youngest daughter was out there and she was lighting the diya, she was watering the basil. And he said, young lady, grant me your best appraisal. How many leaves in your holy basil? O king, give me your best reply. How many clouds are in the sky? Oh, you with your answer so smart and handy. Tell me, how many kisses did you give for Imarti? And he thought that was it. But the girl, she smiled. And she winked and she said, "Very clever, my Raja, but answer without fail. How many times did you lift the buffalo's tail?" And the Raja was shocked. He was incensed. And he was like, how does she know? How does she know about the buffalo? How does she know about the tail? If she knows, then does someone else know too? And he was so embarrassed that he fled back to his palace. And he brooded over this matter for days, for weeks. And soon, this brooding turned to longing. And this longing turned to love for this youngest daughter of the carpenter. And he decided that, of course, she has to be his wife. He would marry her. But he had to teach her one lesson, one last lesson. So he summoned the carpenter and he said, "Okay, so I have decided, Raja being Raja, I've decided to marry your youngest daughter. But I have a condition. She must come to my palace, neither dressed nor naked, not riding a horse, nor sitting in a bullock cart, nor walking. And if she comes any other way, I will put her to death." And the carpenter, of course, he was happy that the king wanted to marry his daughter, but he was like, "What? What?" And he rushed back home and he was in a state of despair and he told everything to his youngest daughter. And the youngest daughter just smiled. She said, this clever young woman, she went inside, she found a fishing net. She took off her clothes and she wrapped the fishing net around her body. So she was neither dressed nor naked. And then she borrowed her neighbor's buffalo and she had her father hitch up behind the buffalo and prodded the buffalo with a stick to move so that she could be pulled along. And she arrived at the Raja's palace, neither dressed nor naked, neither riding a horse, nor sitting in a bullock cart, nor walking. And the Raja and the youngest daughter were married. And the king, the Raja, he got used to having a clever wife around him. And then the Bart stopped and he said, "None, I can tell you this, that their life thereafter was happy and nice. Why, they even gave me some chole curry with rice." So Nala, Damayanti, who is cleverer than the carpenter's daughter, if you marry her, then you would be even happier than the king who married the carpenter's daughter. And then he went on to describe Damayanti. And the image of Damayanti was imprinted on Nal's mind and heart. And from that day onwards, he became lovelorn and distraught, and only these words echoed in his mind and heart: Damayanti, Damayanti, Damayanti. And he waited impatiently to be invited to Damayanti's Swamvar. You see, in those days, Swamvar was a ceremony in which the princess could choose a husband from the suitors who had gathered for the occasion. Now, Damayanti, she had also heard about Nal from the wandering bards, and also from the ministers present in her father's court, who seemed to be telling her tales about, his adventures and his heroism. And once she even had someone, secretly paint a picture of Nal on the lotus leaf, and she always kept that lotus leaf close to her heart. So even though Nal and Damayanti had never met each other, they had never seen each other, they fell in love with each other. One day, Nal was walking alone in his garden, and his mind was lost in thoughts of Damayanti. And the air was very heavy with the scent of orange blossoms. The lotuses, they bloomed in the pond in the middle of the garden, and he was just walking around, not really admiring the nature around him, when suddenly a great, glorious, white swan with golden plume of feathers, It flew past him, and it was flying so low that Nal, he reached out with his hands and caught the bird. And the bird started flapping its wings in despair, and the bird said, please, 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 you're choking me, please, please, Nal, please, let me go. And if you let me go, I'll give you a favor, I'll return a favor. And Nal was startled to hear the bird speak. He staggered and almost dropped the bird. And this bird, he of course had not lost his sense of humor, even in this state of danger. He started laughing and he said, oh, Nal, you don't know me. I am Gagan. I am the king of swans, blessed by the Brahma himself. Listen, I have heard a lot about you in heaven, a lot of wondrous tales about you. I can help you. And the Nal, he wasn't sure if it was real daydreaming or he was daydreaming because he hasn't been himself lately. But he just sighed and he said, of course, if only, my heart pines for Damayanti. My heart aches for her. If only I could tell her how much I love her. And Gagan, the swan, looked at him and he rolled his eyes and he said, hello, in case you haven't noticed, I can fly and I can speak. So maybe I can be your messenger? Did Nal have a choice? He bent over the pond and he plucked a great, beautiful pink lotus, and he placed it gently between the beak of the bird. And he whispered a love song into his ears and let the bird go. And the bird flapped its wings and flew across the wide blue sky towards the kingdom of Vidarbha. That afternoon, Damayanti was sitting by her lotus pond in her garden, and she was admiring the lotuses blooming in the pond, and she was looking at her reflection, and she was admiring the play of light, when suddenly in the pond she saw something golden streaking the sky, and she looked up, wondering if there was a change in weather, if there's going to be thunder and lightning. But then she saw this glorious bird, the swan, come down, and the swan dropped the lotus at her feet. Damayanti picked up the lotus, and she was startled when the bird started to speak. And Gagan rolled his eyes, same reaction. And he said, listen, Damayanti, I am Gagan, king of swans, blessed by the Brahma himself. I have a message for you. If you are the pearl amongst women, Damayanti, then Nal is the pride of men. Nal is your true love as you are his. Oh, Damayanti, Nal's heart aches for you. And this pink lotus is a token of love from Nal, Nal of Nishad. Damayanti looked at the lotus and she gently stroked it and color rose to her cheeks. She blushed, her heart sang and fluttered. And she looked up and she said, tell Nal that I'm going to return this pink lotus at my swamvar soon. And the bird flew away. That evening, Damayanti rushed to the palace where the king and the queen, the Raja and the Rani were sitting. And she was a bundle of nerves and excitement. And she was excited, but she was shy. She said, Father, Mother, I am ready to choose my husband. I'm ready for my swamvar. And the Raja and Rani, they were so happy. They hugged their only daughter. They had been waiting for this day all their life. And of course, immediately, the astrologers were summoned. And the planets and the stars and the moons, everything was studied. And they came up with an auspicious day for the swamvar. And then the proclamations were drafted. The messengers were sent in all directions. On this auspicious day, all the princes and the rajas, they would gather at the king's palace, and Damayanti would choose her husband. And of course, since this was such a great occasion, all the affairs of the state were put aside. Wars, internal tax disputes, everything. The palace had to be made ready. This was to be the royal wedding of the year. And so red, yellow, green, blue, saffron brocades, they draped the divans. The tables were adorned with fragrant flowers. The cooks and the chefs, they haggled for days, for weeks to come up with a royal menu. The cutlery was polished, and the cool marble floors, they were scrubbed clean and polished. It was chaos and mayhem, and the nervous excitement that usually precedes an Indian wedding. And so the day before the swamwer, the roads were jam-packed. Hopeful rajas, sitting on painted elephants, wearing colorful garlands, they arrived. There were sounds of drums, and the trumpets were blaring, people were playing sitars. And even Nal arrived too. He arrived in his gilded golden chariot, pulled by finely decorated horses, and he could hardly calm his excitement. He was going to meet Damayanti, he was going to see her. And if all went well, you got to be prepared for everything in life. Marry her. But you see, the fame and beauty of Damayanti had stirred even the gods. Up in the heavens, 4 gods, they wanted to marry her. Indra, the king of gods, the god of thunder and storm. Agni, the god of fire. Varun, the god of oceans and seas. And Yamraj, you know Yamraj, right? The god of death. So they all wanted to marry her. Now they were gods. They knew that Nal and Damayanti, they liked each other. But they were still hopeful. What chance did a mere mortal stand in front of the gods? Of course Damayanti would choose them. And they had a plan. So they went in their heavenly chariots and they descended to the earth to woo this maiden. Now, they landed at the spot where Nal was resting his horses. And they revealed themselves to Nal, and Nal was dazzled by their luminous forms, and they said, Nal, go to fabulous, lovely Damayanti and tell her that she should choose one of us as her husband. And Nal was in a state of despair. I mean, of course, he was dazzled by the luminous form and commanding presence, but what was this? I mean, he said, forgive me, but how can I go? I'm going there for the swamwer too, hoping to be chosen. The gods, they raised their eyebrows. And Indra was ready to hurl his thunderbolt. And Nal realized that this was a battle bigger than all the battles he had fought. So he gathered his wits about and he tried a little diplomacy, and he said, but even if I could, how can I? Because the palace is guarded by these ferocious guards. How can I even get there? No sooner had he said that than he found himself standing in the palace, Damayanti's palace in the garden. Oh, the palace with its cool fountain heads, glorious flower beds, lotus ponds, and he stood there admiring the garden when Damayanti, beaming like a full moon in the midnight sky, she walked out, and their eyes met. And for a moment, the time stood still. Manmat, the god of love, had struck arrows into their hearts. And Nal thought his heart was going to explode with love for his beloved. And Damayanti wondered whether he was a god or Gandharv, half god, half human. And they just stood there. And then suddenly a mating call of the peacock brought them back to their senses. Oh, it was bad luck to see your bride before the wedding. Nal, he bowed his head and he said, I'm sorry, forgive me. I'm Nal, and I have come here as a messenger of gods. Indra, Agni, Varun, and Yamraj, they want you to choose one of them as your husband. And Damayanti, the swan song was playing in her mind, in her heart, and she smiled and her heart was filled with rapture, and she said, oh, you? So you are Nal? You are the great Nal of Nishad? Well, you must know that I orchestrated this entire swamwer so that I could marry you. Now, if you say you love me, like the way if you love me like the way you say you love me, then you have to be present tomorrow at the Swayamvar. And I will choose you and only you. And of course, Nal's heart was filled with hope at seeing her talk so bravely. But he said, what about the gods? And she planted her 2 fingers on his lips. Shh, I will only choose you and only you. And she turned and left. And Nal, hesitantly, he turned back too, to carry the reply back to the gods. Oh, do you think the gods were happy? Oh, no, they were incensed by her reply. Indra thundered and roared, and he said, how dare she? And you, Nal, you carried the words only in letters and not in spirit. I will do what I have to do tomorrow. That night, Nal and Damayanti could not sleep a wink. They just kept turning and tossing in their beds. Finally, the day of the Swayamvar. All the kings, the princes, the elders, they were seated in the dazzling Darbar hall. The Darbar hall shone in splendor, and the cool marble floors, they reflected the colors of the banners and the paintings that hung on the wall. And the king and the queen, the Raja and Rani, they sat on their thrones, their handmaidens fanning them with peacock feathers. And there was an excitement in the room. The room echoed with murmurs, and the excitement was mounting. And then the drums sounded, and the herald announced the arrival of Damayanti. Nal was there too. And 4 gods, they were seated on either side of him. So when Damayanti glided into the room, there was a hushed silence. Everyone in the room was taken aback. Looking resplendent in a red gold sari, ornamented from top to bottom with gold, wearing jasmine flowers in her hair, as she walked in, of course, the men had heard about her beauty from the wandering bards, but she was far lovelier than they had imagined. Face round like the full moon, eyes shaped like lotus petals, neck like swan's neck, dark glowing skin, long black hair. Oh, 1,000 pair of eyes followed her as she walked forward. She bowed before the Raja and Rani, who blessed her. And then she was taken from one group to the other, whilst a herald proclaimed the qualities of each and every prince. And there was a terrible excitement at the prospect of being chosen, and you could hear 1,000 hearts fluttering wildly. But Damayanti had her heart and mind set on one person and one person alone, and that was Nal. And she wondered if he was there. Was he even there? And she was nervous, but she walked with the calm and grace of a confident woman. And then she finally heard Nal's name being announced. And she looked up to catch a brief glance. He was there. Her heart fluttered, and she raised her hand to give the lotus to Nal. But wait a minute. She was confused. What was that? She rubbed her eyes in disbelief. There were 5 men, identical men, each one an image of Nal. 5 Nal. How could that be? Who was the real Nal? And then she realized, oh my God, the gods must have tricked her. Well, this was not the time to panic. She took a deep breath to calm herself down. All right. Who is Nal? I am, they all said in one. 5 voices said all together. She stared at the 5 men in front of her. And 4 of them, they stared back at her without blinking their eyes. Only one man's eyes blinked and fluttered. She knew gods do not blink, only humans do. Check. Then she studied their faces. 4 of them, They were unblemished, not even a wrinkle, not even a crease on their face, no sweat. It was very hot and humid that day. And then she looked at the other one. The skin was creased, and oh, there was a tiny drop of sweat trickling down the forehead. Check. Gods do not sweat, humans do. And then she saw that all the 5 men were wearing garlands of marigold flowers. And for 4 of them, the garlands were very fresh and crisp. But one man's garland, the flowers were slightly wilted, probably because of the heat. That's it. She knew it. Her heart pounded, and she took one step forward, then another. And she was about to give the lotus when she heard a gasp, which was quickly suppressed. And this came from the man to the right. And she looked at this man, and this man was sweating. And he stared back at her with an agonized face. And she saw that this man was wearing a garland, and the flower seemed to be fading fast too. What was that? What kind of a trick was that? Maybe another trick by this cruel Indra? And then she looked at the man in front of him. And she noticed that this man did not cast a shadow on the marble floor. How could she have forgotten? Gods do not cast shadows. Humans do. So she quickly took a step to the right. She did a quick check. Okay, this man is not sweating, check. This man's skin is creased and, and he's staring at me, blinking his eyes, check. His garland flowers are fading fast, check. He has a shadow, check. And she raised her hand and gave the lotus, looked him in the eye, and gave the lotus to Nal and said, I choose you. And again, for a moment, the time stood still. There was a fragrance of love in the air. And they had found each other against all odds, and it seemed that they would live happily ever after. And then the drums sounded, and the sitars played, and the trumpets played, and the herald announced that Nal and Damayanti were to be wed. And of course, there was a lot of mayhem and chaos from the gods. They did not like to be embarrassed. Indra was ready with his thunderbolt. Varun, the god of seas and oceans, he was frothing and fuming at his mouth, like waves crashing on the shore. And Agni, his eyes were bloodshot red with anger. And well, Yamraj, as they say, if looks could kill. But Damayanti and Nal and the other elders, they knew what to do. They chanted the mantras, they offered their prayers, they offered them fruits and the sweets that they liked, and the gods were pacified. And also they realized how clever Damayanti was. They didn't want a clever wife. And so they gave the blessings to Nal and Damayanti, and they even gave them a few extra, bonus boons as a compensation for their bad behavior. And they left for their heavenly abode. And let me tell you that the wedding, the marriage of Nal and Damayanti was celebrated with such pomp and pageantry. Oh, singers sang, musicians, dancers, magicians, they entertained. There was a lavish banquet set with an array of delicacies. And the priests, they chanted the mantras, and the sacred fire burned bright, and Nal and Damayanti were married amid a shower of petals from the devas in the heavens and elders on earth. And of course, it was the royal wedding of the year, as they had planned. And they had even commissioned artists and bards, especially for the occasion, because they were the tabloids at that time. And so, you would think that they lived happily ever after. But unknown to them, a storm was brewing in the realm above. They would have to fight a demon, Kali, who was the demon of twilight, darkness, Kali Yuga. They would lose everything, their kingdom. They would be banished into the forest, forced to survive on berries, roots, dirty water from the pond. And then they would be separated. Nal and Damayanti would be separated for years before reuniting again. But that's a very long story. And I hope to tell you that story next time. So, how are we with the time? Thank you.
It's fine. So we have 8 minutes to 9.
Okay, perfect. So,
if you want to tell another story, it's fine for me. John will.
Yes, I've just seen your note, Bianca. As if by magic, I've been told to unmute my microphone. The wonders, I can get these messages all the way from Romania, and it's brilliant. Shelly, that was fantastic. That was marvelous.
thank you so much.
One of the great privileges of curating this site is that I'm meeting so many fantastic tellers. And it's been a real privilege tonight to have you on. That was the most amazing story. And I love the way with Indian stories, there are stories within stories, within stories, within stories. And
Well, I have a secret. The original Nal and Damayanti story is actually an offshoot story from Mahabharata.
Yeah.
But the carpenter's daughter story is actually not an Indian story. It was some story that I came across. It's a Latin American folktale, but
Really?
I really loved it so much that I had to adapt it to an Indian setting, and I kind of used it in my Nal and Damayanti story. So it's not really an Indian story.
But you did it in that way of story within story, and it's brilliant.
Thank you so much.
Fooled me totally.
Yes, you did.
Fantastic. And I think you've got a children's set for us later in the month or something, haven't you? I put down my sheet of paper, which I should have next to me at this moment, to say when you're on again. Do you happen to know when you're on again? Are you on again?
No,
I'm sure I put you on again.
I'm not aware of it, sorry.
Did I put you on? Where's? Aha. Yeah, I've got it. When I was trying to get my get everything working early. Yeah, I've got so you're there, and is there a fry? Did I not?
No, you didn't.
Oh. Well, you're welcome back anytime. I can tell you. We'll talk, and we'll talk about another set. I'd love you to do another set if you would.
Sure, thank you.
That's fantastic. And for those glassons for stories, in about an hour's time, Lucy Wood is doing stories on the site for Bianca. It's the healing stories, isn't it, Bianca?
Yeah, it
There we
is.
are. That's at 8 o'clock. Tomorrow, I've got a fantastic thing in the evening, which is it's Gypsy Traveller and Roma History Month. And I've got singers and musicians and storytellers and poets coming onto that for a 2-hour celebration. So that's going to be extraordinary. That's 6 o'clock UK time tomorrow. Janet, it's good to see you're when I used to work at an arts centre, we relied on people like Janet because they'd always come. And so hello, Janet.
Can you unmute yourself?
Yes, I have. I've done. I listen a lot. I tell sometimes, but I'm a little shy sometimes.
Oh, well,
But
one of the magazine one of the magazine programs or something where we have lots of people on. You must say So, John, I want to tell a story. But,
Yeah.
so one
I have-
week. But yeah, I'll catch you out and sort of drop it on you without you
Oh
realising.
dear. I best be
So-
ready then.
So it won't be this Monday. You're okay. You've
Oh.
got.
Thank you.
Oh, it's been wonderful. Has anyone got any questions for Shelley? I know there's not a lot of people in the room. But,
I have left everyone speechless.
Now I'm waiting for you to come again to continue this story.
yeah,
Mm.
yeah, Bianca. Yeah. If I don't have Shelley on again, I'm going to be in trouble with you, aren't I?
Yeah, because I want to know the rest of the story because it's very intriguing.
So, oh, we got. There's.
Stephanie is
And
with
hello,
us.
Stephanie.
Hello.
Oh, so we're going with what have we got? We've got. I love these boards because I can see I have. So where are you, Janet? Where are you?
I'm in England, in Staffordshire.
In Staffordshire. So
Mhm.
we've got Staffordshire, Gloucestershire. I'm down in Wiltshire. Then we've got Marrakesh, and we've got Cluj in Romania, and we've got Shelley in Basel in Switzerland.
Excellent.
So we have truly gone around the world tonight. So thank you very much, Shelley, and please come again. We'll sort out a date when you've got your diary in front of me, and we'll find some for you to come back because it'll be about a month's time, but we'd love to have you back. Thank you for such a brilliant story.
Yes, thank you.
Thank
Really
you.
enjoyed that. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
So, I must leave. So goodbye and thank you.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Goodbye, everyone.
Bye.
See you tomorrow, Bianca.
See you tomorrow. Bye. Bye, Shelley. Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you.
Bye.